Okay. All right. Okay, so I'm here with Mason. Mason, can you give us just a quick introduction of your current role and responsibilities?
Yeah, absolutely. So I work at a digital marketing agency in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I am a paid media analyst. So work on a variety of different accounts. We don't necessarily have one specific niche that we focus on. We've got e-commerce clients, we've got lead gen clients, all different sizes, different industries, that sort of thing. And I work on the accounts alongside my coworkers. We typically usually have one or two individuals on each account, and we work to get the accounts in the best possible shape. Oftentimes, we're onboarding clients that have worked with the previous agency and just haven't seen success. A lot of times they're outdated structures, campaign structures, that sort of thing. So we just really get those accounts up to the best possible shape that we can.
Gotcha. All right, so I wanted to bring you in just so we could go over like one of your accounts. And before we get started with that account, just give us a little bit of context about the business and what you're doing with them.
Yeah, are you talking specifically within my company or for the accounts?
Just so a specific the account that I was referring to was like that messy account we spoke
Yep.
about last week. So that account,
Uh,
just give us a little bit of details about that and what you're doing for them.
yeah, absolutely. So the account, it's a direct to consumer account. So they've got products that they sell online, and they're advertising primarily on Google Ads and Microsoft Ads. They had worked with a consultant previously, freelancer, who was managing the account, and they just weren't really quite lining up on the goals and objectives that they had for the business, and they weren't able to quite get there with the previous freelancer that they were working with. So we did do a diagnostic for them, identified quite a number of different opportunities, and kind of provided that kind of general information to them. But for the most part, they are one of the leading businesses in their category. I'm not going to explicitly
That's
say
fine.
the category, but they are definitely one of the bigger names in their category. Right now, spending around 70,000 a month on Google and Microsoft, and that's kind of where we came in. Just a messy account, a lot of room for opportunity there.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I know firsthand how messy accounts can get, and I saw multiple when I was working for a marketing agency. If you were to give a percentage on how many accounts you get that are poorly managed, specifically, like ad accounts, what would you say that is? For me, it looked like it was like 90% of the accounts that I got. What would you say, percentage wise, it is for you?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, honestly, I would say it's pretty similar as well. Probably, probably 75 to 90% of the
Okay.
accounts are in a pretty rough spot. It's usually why they're coming to us,
Mhm.
and we're able to really find those opportunities for them. And that's in both e-commerce, but also lead gen too.
So,
There's usually pretty messy accounts across both
okay.
industries for
And
us. Yeah.
why do you think that is? It's hard to believe that like these big companies are spending like 50,000, 70,000 or more per month have messy accounts. Why do you think that is? Is it because they were working with a consultant? Like what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it is hard to believe, especially with those size of budgets. But honestly, I think it's a lot of it comes down to not necessarily being able to communicate and align on goals effectively. I think that's a big piece of the puzzle. A lot of times, you know, um, some of us that work in the Google Ads industry, or just kind of the ads industry in general, we've got all our little optimizations we know and we can make, but if we're not aligned specifically with the client's goals, whether that be a specific ROAS target or a revenue target, you can really get lost in the weeds with all the little optimizations you're making. And I think that that was a big part of where the kind of messiness came from in this account.
Okay. All right, so it'll be great if we go through that account you mentioned and just break it down, have some questions for you, and kind of just talk about it, paid media buyer to media buyer, about the account.
Absolutely. Yep. That sounds good.
So, what would you say makes this particular account messy? Is it too many campaigns, too many creatives? What would that be?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing jumping into the account right away was the over segmentation. They were running probably 60 performance max campaigns, and probably 20 plus shopping campaigns. And so it's
Wow.
kind of crazy to see. Yeah, it's pretty crazy to see just how segmented they really broke things down. And they'd have one shopping campaign for one product line, and they've got, hundreds of product lines. So it's pretty pretty interesting strategy that they an approach that they took beforehand. But that was the biggest red flag. And then I would say the other one would be just then the lack of first party data that they were using in the accounts as well. Using a lot of third party Google Ads audiences and that sort of thing, but not tying in a ton of first party audiences and not doing any really sort of retargeting or remarketing to their audiences as well. So those were
Wow.
probably the biggest red flags or the biggest kind of areas of opportunity right away.
Okay, yeah, that sounds like a lot of PMAX, a lot of shopping. Is it like by state level, by product level? Like, what were they segmenting?
Yeah, it was primarily by product level. They were mostly segmenting campaigns by the product categories, but sometimes even by specific products themselves. And within each, like let's just say within each Performance Max campaign, really they only had one asset group. A lot of times no creatives in there either, no ad copy,
Oh,
which is understandable if you're trying to get Performance Max to just run on shopping. But they also had shopping campaigns, so it was a really interesting structure and a lot of, like I said, a lot of opportunity there. But yeah, a lot to sift through with all those campaigns and that sort of breakout. But
now, what about the tracking or the conversion tracking? Would you say that was accurate or set up correctly?
I think they had their primary conversions tracking correctly for purchases, but they didn't have an add to cart conversion, which was a big opportunity as well for us to get that set up and tied in, just so that we can remarket to those users who added to cart but not purchased. So for the most part, I think their primary conversion was correct, but definitely opportunity.
Got it. Okay. And what platforms are they running? Is it just Google and Bing, you said?
Yep, Google and Bing for right now. We're planning to introduce Facebook as well, or Meta.
So they're spending roughly 70,000 a month, but none of it was Meta. So no
Nope,
ads on Meta.
no ads on Meta. Nope,
Okay. Then yeah, there's opportunity there for sure.
absolutely.
Okay. And like, how do you determine, like, let's just say you were to go over to Meta. How do you determine the budgets to put for each platform? Do you go like 80%, 20% Meta, 80% on what they have currently? Or I guess they have Bing too, but how would you break?
Yes. So yeah, good question. So right now, we've got them split 80% Google, 20% Bing, give or take, and kind of monitoring that based on where revenue and ROAS is at, and aligning with their goals that they have, and then slowly kind of shifting more budget back and forth depending on it whether or not we're able to hit those targets on a monthly basis. But we also look at year over year data too. It's really important for them as they're pretty seasonal. But in terms of like introducing meta ads, we would likely start with smaller amount of budget, probably allocating or reallocating a portion of what we have in Google Ads right now, and then keep that fairly small just to kind of test and get in that market. and get on that platform. But then from there, we would plan to scale if we can hit our targets.
Do you guys also run TikTok ads, your agency?
We do not right now. I believe we've had some clients in the past, none that I've worked on specifically, but I see that as an area of opportunity for them specifically with, potentially influencer marketing kind of tied in. We've got a couple clients right now, not on this account, but that do have like influencer partnerships, and we do promote videos on YouTube that way. But I think TikTok is an awesome opportunity, just not one that we've tackled yet.
Gotcha. Okay. So this account, what would be the next steps to start improving it? I know there's all these campaigns. Would you like cut it down? What is the next steps that you would do?
Yep. So first thing that we and that I jumped into to do was really trying to understand first their business and the product categories, because it's quite a few products and a number of different categories. But then kind of starting to piece that together as I began to understand the business a little bit more on how to revamp the account structure. That was the first thing that I saw that would be the kind of first area of opportunity that I would like to jump on. So um, basically broke out the product categories and kind of planned that out into different asset groups that I could potentially push through for Performance Max. And along with that, just looking in through the account settings, seeing what type of bidding strategies they've used, looking at their historical data to kind of really understand, okay, where is the account at now? How did they get to where they're at? And how are the current campaigns in the account structure, functioning and performing for them? And then kind of laying that out just in a spreadsheet to kind of identify, okay, here's how we can start to structure and improve the account structure and the campaign structure for them.
Okay. And when it comes to like creating a new campaign, the budget, do you have like a formula, or like do you go based off like target CPA times three, or like what does that look like for you when it comes to like determining that budget?
Yeah, so budgets for the at the campaign level, we've kind of got it broken out. I would say just based on the performance targets. So we're really using target ROAS for our bidding strategy there. And so a little bit less budget, I would say, allocated more towards the higher ROAS targets, just because as we scale budgets there, typically the ROAS kind of drops a little bit. So we tend to add more budget to the higher ROAS, or excuse me, to the lower ROAS campaigns, and then kind of play around with the budget on the higher ROAS campaigns. But we do have a kind of a budget tracker formula that we use to just kind of see our pacing for the month. So we know we need to spend 70,000, and we're looking to hit for this client specifically 500% ROAS and 150,000 in revenue, give or take. And so we kind of track all that using formulas in Google Sheet, pulling data from utilizing funnel.io is the software that we use to pull data from the platforms into Google Sheets.
Got it. Okay, so this e-commerce client of yours, uh, how many products would you say they have? Do they have hundreds of products, multiple variants? What is it?
Yep. Yep. They've got quite a few variants. Right now, I think active products, they've got around 3,500
Oh,
products. So a decent amount of products. But I would say they fall into primarily six major categories.
hmm.
Um, and that's how we set up the initial Performance Max campaign for them, was just breaking out asset groups by those product categories and then setting it up so that it pulls through for the feed for those specific products in those
Okay.
categories.
All right. When it comes to like e-commerce and running Google ads, it is very important to have like a good feed or well-maintained Google feed. So do you guys have someone maintaining that, or do you do that? How do you go about it with maintaining that?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, it's super important. I have been tackling that right now, updating product titles and descriptions for them just based off of Google Merchant Center best practices. Um, Again, that was also a pretty messy process. Came in with pretty unoptimized product titles and descriptions, very short titles, a lot of duplicate titles and that sort of thing, and just missing some of those technical specifications in the product descriptions. So really just revamping their titles and descriptions has been the first step that I've taken, to really add more visibility to their products, utilizing the feed, and just really improve that conversion rate for them as well.
Yeah, it's super important. I have a client that has 17,000 variants on the Google Merchant feed. It's a lot. So I have someone that helps me just maintaining all the disapprovals, like helping me with titles. Like it could potentially be like a full-time job just doing that. Like if it has a lot of products and variants.
Yeah,
So yeah, it's super important and definitely to have a successful Google ad campaign.
absolutely. Totally agree.
So do you have like a go-to strategy for e-commerce? I know it depends client to client, but I was just wondering if you have any like methodologies or like maybe like always have a PMax campaign for this e-commerce or for e-commerce in general or anything at all like that.
Yeah, good question. I would say strategy would be to my strategy would be to implement performance max campaigns, shopping campaigns, and search campaigns, so you can kind of hit the full funnel. Um, in terms of kind of how I would go about that would be setting up a performance max campaign with a higher target ROAS, and for the higher value products that a e-commerce company may offer, and then having a secondary performance max campaign with a slightly lower target ROAS, that would then capture those lower value items that they have. And then in terms of shopping, I would set up a kind of similar. I would set up a high priority and a low priority shopping campaign. And within that, I would set the high priority shopping campaign at a lower target ROAS, and then the low priority at a higher target ROAS. And so basically that we can kind of capture visibility across all the products depending on how things are performing, but also the price points, and kind of leveraging the structure that way. And then implementing search campaigns for more lower funnel conversions, and utilizing dynamic search ads so that you can really get specific products that may not be included in some of your primary search campaigns, that would show and get visibility, but then also have more targeted search campaigns with ad groups broken out for the primary categories as well. And one thing I did forget to mention, with the shopping campaigns, I do set it up so that all products are included within those shopping campaigns.
Mhm.
Uh, that's my current structure and kind of methodology.
Okay,
Right.
got it. Yeah, I was about to ask you about that campaign. All right. And then if you were to run Meta, do you have a methodology there?
Not as much specifically for Meta. Primarily my experience is with Google and Bing, for e-commerce specifically. But got a decent amount more experience with Meta for lead gen clients. So don't have a go-to structure to kind of walk through on the e-commerce front with Meta, specifically just yet, but we are planning to kind of work through that and develop a plan for this client, here, in the near
Yeah.
future.
Okay. I mean, after this call, I mean, I could go over the methodology that I got and see what
Yeah,
you think about it.
yeah, that would be awesome. That'd be cool.
Cool. All right, so I just have like a couple other questions on just uh what you would do with any account, not just this specific account. Um, and the first one would be how do you handle reporting? For example, attribution is really hard, right? And especially when there's multiple platforms. Do you guys use a third-party software like Triple Whale, like or any other softwares at all, or do you have like a Looker Studio, a Google Sheet? Like, how do you handle reporting?
Yeah, so we use a Looker Studio sheets that we build out, and just pulling in direct data from Google Ads and Bing. But for Bing, there's not like a direct integration there. So we use, again, funnel.io as our kind of middleman to send the data back and forth for us. And we can kind of aggregate all the data through funnel and create data sources that are multiple different platforms, and then kind of pull it in from there. And typically we meet once a month with our clients to run through reporting, and kind of walk through the numbers and where things are at with them, really trying to focus on kind of performance based on what their business goals are, and not necessarily what we think might be the best thing to do, but providing those recommendations based on the data, but really trying to show, okay, here's how we're progressing towards the goals that you have as a business.
Okay, I'm curious. Do you guys report like MER, like marketing efficiency ratio, or is it just like ROAS, or what do you report on?
Yeah, for efficiency, it's primarily ROAS for e-commerce clients. For lead gen clients, I typically report on cost per lead. That's usually the big one for my clients, but also there's a different sort of story within the lead gen side of things. We don't need to get into it too much, but there's like marketing qualified lead and sales qualified lead. So we'll also kind of go through what our cost for those each different stages of the sales cycle. All
Hmm,
right.
got it. Okay, and then when it comes to creatives, how do you handle that? Do you give creative direction, or do you have like a graphic designer in-house, or what do you guys do for that?
Typically, I provide creative direction and recommendations, but leave it up to the client to resource the creatives. Don't have a creative director or creative team that I work with. So it's primarily on the client, and they know that based on the retainer and everything. So that's typically, a conversation that we have up front with them. But that being said, we do analyze creative performance, provide recommendations based off what's performing well. Try to utilize, especially for e-commerce clients, a lot of lifestyle imagery, as we see that perform best for our e-commerce clients. So I would say that's typically how I go about handling it.
Yeah, I imagine with that account, since they're spending so much, they have creatives that they might have paused that it might have been performing well, or you could use that creative and reiterate it or change it up, and that could
Yeah.
perform well as well.
Yeah, it's surprising though. They didn't have a ton of creatives in the
Really?
account. Yeah, it was pretty surprising. They only had creatives for probably one or two campaigns out of the 100+ campaigns that they were
Oh,
running, and primarily relying on the feed. They've got creatives that are pulling through from their feed, but those are
okay.
just, pretty basic product images. So did request some of that. They did have creatives that they could provide me with, that they were utilizing on their website and organically. So got those plugged into the campaigns as well.
Do you guys work with influencers, or do you recommend the clients to work with influencers?
Yeah, we don't have any specific connections within our agency that we can pass off to clients, but I always like to emphasize that if there is any opportunities that they see from their end, that's a huge opportunity. And like I said, there are a few clients that I have that do have influencer partnerships that they've already established outside of the relationship that I have with them. Um, so they're definitely utilizing that, and we're pushing that through for them.
Okay, got it. And then when it comes to the budget, and when you see, let's just say, for example, you see a campaign that's performing well, the performance is good. Do you increase the budget like 20%, 30%? Like what would be like the next course of action when you see that?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, probably around 20%. Typically reallocating from underperforming campaigns, is my go-to strategy. If we're really seeing a campaign tick off, we may, I might reach out to the client and say, just let them know, like, hey, we're really driving solid performance here with this campaign. Do you want to spend a little bit more this month since we're hitting those targets and it's efficient for where we're trying to be at. And so I might have that conversation with the client as well. But
Gotcha.
we can kind
Okay.
of
Now, what about when the results are like declining? Do you remove some of the budget, turn it off? Like, what do you look at?
Yep. So typically try to avoid completely turning things off. When performance is declining, typically revert to testing, whether that be new bid strategies, shifting targets with our bid strategies. Sometimes I can get a slightly less efficient campaign, but still drive revenue where we need to be at. So lowering a target ROAS could be one option. And just pulling back slightly on the budget until things kind of cool off. But yeah, I would say that's typically like testing is typically my first point of action that I would take when things are declining a bit. Testing new landing pages, testing new bid strategies, that sort of thing.
Okay. What's your approach for like split testing? Would you, let's just say for a search campaign, do you create two ad groups, two ads? Like, how do you go about it?
I really like to utilize the experiments function in Google Ads to test out different A/B sort of tests. So typically would set up an experiment within Google Ads and just kind of tweak one or maybe two things, but typically try to keep it to just one change. And then depending on how performance is for the current campaign, would kind of adjust how much budget split is between those two. But for the most part, I would say I typically go for 50% budget split if it's a struggling campaign and I see an opportunity to test something new.
What about for pmax? Would you do different asset groups within that pmax?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, because the experiment function doesn't work well
Yeah.
with Performance Max, so there's no option for that. So, yeah, I would say testing new asset groups, but oftentimes I actually do create a new campaign for Performance Max, just to really just kind of start fresh and see what we can do there. For example, I had one Performance Max campaign where one of the asset groups was really cannibalizing the other. And so split those out into two separate campaigns and really saw performance improve for that product that just wasn't getting visibility or wasn't even getting any spend as well.
It kind of reminds me like on Meta, CBO, like where Meta will go spend the budget, the majority of the budget in one like ad versus like another one. Like one of the ads might get like $100, another ad will get like $10.
Right.
So yeah, that's probably what happens on Google as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just weird how sometimes, it just wants to go in one direction and sometimes you got to step in and make that change to
Mhm.
figure it out.
So what do you think about all the recommendations that Google gives? What do you think some are okay, or like what are your thoughts on it? Like, are they good or not?
It's a good question. And I think it's definitely heavily debated in the media buyer
Yeah,
community.
no.
I would say there's certain things that they recommend that could be helpful. I think definitely approaching it with caution is the best route. I think Google, candidly does want us to spend money and spend more money.
Yeah.
But I would say that not all of the recommendations are bad. I've had some Google reps that I've met with that have provided some pretty strategic insight, and it hasn't felt like they're just trying to get me to spend more money. Um, But that being said, I always do approach it with a bit of a kind of a critical viewpoint and think about, okay, how is this actually going to affect performance? I don't ever turn on auto recommendations or anything like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, typically really try to think critically about it
Mhm.
and think how is this actually going to affect performance for me. And oftentimes they want to just push you to make a change. And like I kind of had mentioned earlier, I think testing is the best way to go about that. And not necessarily just immediately making the change.
So would you say some Google reps are good, some are not? Like, what do you think?
Yeah, I think some are better than others for sure. I think the from my experience, typically the bigger the account is, the better Google reps that I've been able to meet with, especially if you're ramping up spend. They
Mhm.
sometimes do have like special reps that are just there for like growth.
Yeah, they have more advanced. Like they have teams. I
Yeah,
think it's the Google Growth team. I
yeah,
actually work with one of them, and they give better recommendations and kind of like a Google rep. But those are like budgets over 2,000 per day. I don't know if
yeah.
you work with any Google Growth specialists. I think that's what they're called, Google Growth.
Yeah, I think so too. I did work with one just a couple months ago, and we were really ramping up spend for one of my clients, and hitting right around that, daily targets or daily amount. So they provided some good recommendations. I would say a bit better than the standard Google reps that you might meet with for sure.
Yeah. And I would say like it's better that a Google rep or a Google growth specialist talks with a media buyer instead of like the client. Because with the media buyer, at least you'll understand the language and you'll kind of like push back on certain things or ask questions. While the client will be like, I don't know, do your thing. Okay, I'll do whatever you tell me. That's pretty much what.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's a lot more technical than just kind of doing whatever they say. I think you got to be able to have that full picture that you're walking into the conversation with, and yeah, I think it's much more valuable for the business to have a media buyer meet with a Google rep. Absolutely,
Yeah, exactly. All right, Mason. Well, that's it. That's all I wanted to ask you. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
absolutely. Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a great conversation.
All right. Peace. All right. So